What if we tell you that there was a point guard who was taken one pick ahead of Chris Paul in the 2005 draft because he was supposed to be that good? We're talking about Deron Williams, one of the best point guards in the NBA during the late 2000s, and was supposed to be one of the greatest point guards. After all, Williams was putting up 20 points and 10 assists on a regular basis while helping the Utah Jazz contend for a playoff spot almost every year he was on that team. He was an all-star and an all-NBA player. Williams was making a good case for himself as the best point guard in the league. But all that changed in almost an instant. Now, while Chris Paul is still a relevant name in the NBA, Deron Williams has become a forgotten player whose name has fallen out of the limelight after a quick decline. So, what exactly happened to Deron Williams? We'll go over this and more today. But before we get into it, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching one of the best new basketball channels on YouTube, Swish Archives. During the late part of the 2000s, the Utah Jazz had a revival of the 90s era. But instead of John Stockton passing the ball to Karl Malone, it was Deron Williams making Carlos Boozer's life easy. The man was a walking assist machine and a master of the pick and roll. If you needed someone who could run the offense perfectly, Williams was your guy. And he spent 4 straight seasons averaging double digits in assists for the Jazz. But Utah already saw something special in him when they drafted him 3rd overall in 2005, which had one of the weaker draft classes of the 2000s. But Deron Williams was one of the players who made that class special because he was already showing flashes of brilliance during his 3-year run with Illinois in college. And he was so good that the Jazz were conflicted between him and Chris Paul, eventually deciding to draft him instead because of his size and scoring. Back when point guards were still smaller, Williams had an impressive build at 6'3" and 200 pounds. He wasn't getting bullied by bigger guards, and he was actually tall enough to see over smaller point guards and make the best plays for his teammates. Basically, he had a complete skill set for a point guard because he could pass, shoot, and drive to the basket. During a day and age when point guards were more valued than their ability to make plays, Williams could do everything and then some. He had skills that would have been perfect for today's more modern NBA because he could create opportunities for himself as well. Of course, his NBA career didn't immediately take off because he saw bench minutes and was still adjusting during his rookie year. But from 2006 to 2011, he had some of the best stats a point guard could ever have. During that span, Deron Williams averaged 18.6 points and 10.2 assists. The only point guard who had comparable numbers was Chris Paul. Not even Steve Nash was putting up the scoring numbers that Williams was averaging during that stretch. And during the 2010-11 season, Williams saw his peak by averaging 20.1 points and 10.3 assists. But those were not just empty stats. Williams was the literal cog that moved the Utah Jazz's offensive machine, turning that squad into a well-oiled machine that ran through a lot of competitors and went on to compete well in the tough Western Conference. In 2007, the Jazz got to the conference finals, with Williams averaging 19.2 points and 8.6 assists. Then, over the next 3 playoff runs, he averaged at least 20 points and 10 assists during the postseason. He was exceptionally dominant in the 2010 first-round series against the Denver Nuggets. His best performance came in Game 2 when he had 33 points and 14 assists. Those were superstar numbers coming from one of the best point guards in the league. In 2008, Deron Williams also played for the Redeem team, one of the greatest Olympic teams ever assembled. While he wasn't one of the stars on that squad, he averaged 8 points and 2.8 assists in just 19 minutes. At that point, people understood why the Jazz took Williams over Chris Paul, who was also a superstar in his own right. Deron Williams was the perfect man on that Jazz team because he embraced the system but also knew when to take over. But as great as Williams was on the Jazz, things weren't always rainbows and butterflies in Utah. With the Jazz struggling to actually break the barrier between playoff contention and championship contention, there were questions about whether or not his team had enough pieces to stay relevant for a long time or even keep Williams happy. During the 2010-11 season, the Utah front office wasn't so sure they had a chance to sign Williams to a long-term contract with the Jazz after the team struggled during the playoffs and even lost the legendary Jerry Sloan, who left his position as the head coach, a role he held since 1989 when he was still coaching Stockton and Malone. So, when the Jazz realized that they could lose Deron Williams to free agency once his contract was up, they traded him to the New Jersey Nets at the 2011 trade deadline. The trade allowed Williams to start fresh with a new franchise. Meanwhile, the Nets got the proven star they wanted, as they were set to transition to Brooklyn, New York. So it looked like a win-win situation for both parties because Williams now had a chance to play for a much bigger market while giving the Nets the star attraction the franchise needed to make its move to Brooklyn smoother. While he only played 12 games for the Nets during the 2010-2011 season after the trade because of a wrist injury, he gave that team hope by averaging 15 points and 12.8 assists. In fact, he had 18 assists twice in just his first 5 games in New Jersey. Then, in his final game of the regular season, he dished out 21 assists. So even though he was still new to that team, he proved he wasn't just a mere product of the Utah Jazz's pick-and-roll heavy system. Instead, he proved that he could actually pass the ball at an exceptional level, regardless of where he was playing. Williams peaked as a scorer in his first full season with the New Jersey Nets during the 2011-2012 season. This time, however, he was asked to be more of a scorer instead of a playmaker because the Nets needed someone who could carry the offensive load on a team that didn't have a lot of scorers. He shined in that role, averaging a career-high 21 points while still dishing out 8.7 assists. His best performance as a scorer came on March 3rd, 2012, when he single-handedly destroyed the Charlotte Bobcats for 57 points while making all 21 of his free throws. He had a legitimate claim to the title of the league's best point guard, even though younger guards like Derrick Rose and Russell Westbrook were rising through the ranks. But while those players may be younger and more athletic, Williams was still one of the best passers and shooters in the playmaker role. It looked like the future was going to be good for the Nets as they were set to move to Brooklyn the following season. During the 2012 offseason, he secured his future with the Nets after signing a 5-year, $98.7 million deal. And with the team's move to Brooklyn completed, he was now playing under brighter lights while leading a good team that had Joe Johnson and Brook Lopez helping him out on offense. But while he was still one of the better point guards in the league, there seemed to be something missing from Williams' game during the 2012-13 season. He could still get to the basket and shoot from anywhere on the floor, but it looked like he didn't have the same explosiveness he once had with the Jazz. On top of that, he wasn't in the right system that took full advantage of his playmaking skills. Because of that, he ended the season averaging 18.9 points and 7.7 assists, which weren't enough to give him an all-star spot. And after news came out that he had a bone spur in his ankle, it looked like time was catching up to him. In what looked like a home run play for the Nets, the team traded for Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett, who were both in their late 30s, in the hopes that their star power could push the Nets to greater heights. But while this team expected Deron Williams to be the guy who could keep this team together from the point guard spot, he played nowhere near the level the team expected him to play at, and he wasn't even 30 yet. From 2013 to 2015, he averaged 13.6 points and 6.4 assists while shooting only 41.7% from the field. And after the Nets had a disappointing end to their season once more, Williams moved on from that team after the franchise bought out the last 2 years of his contract. He had a chance to start fresh with the Dallas Mavericks in 2015, but he was now just a shell of his former self. Williams lost a ton of his athleticism, got heavier, and did not have the killer instinct he once had when he was in Utah. It didn't take long for NBA teams to realize that he was a lost cause. By 2017, he was out of the NBA at just 32 years old. On the other hand, Chris Paul, the guy who got drafted a pick after him in 2005, was still competing for playoff spots while posting all-star numbers. So what happened to Deron Williams, and why did he decline so fast? The first culprit is his health. Bone spurs are no joke because they cause pain in the affected joint. This caused Williams to lose a lot of mobility and athleticism. Also, ever since moving to the Nets, he struggled with front office and coaching stability. The franchise changed coaches almost every season. On top of that, the roster stability was just as bad because players were coming in and out of the team. There's also the possibility that he just didn't have the heart of a great competitor, or at the very least, his desire to compete fell off when the issues within the Nets franchise destroyed his confidence and competitive spirit. On the other hand, he had a good environment talent in Utah because he was a young guy, proven he was one of the best point guards in the league, and had a chance to play for one of the best coaches in the history of the NBA in a city that didn't put a ton of pressure on his shoulders. Then, there was a huge shift in the league. During the 2010s, the NBA transitioned into a more guard-oriented style where point guards were now asked to shoot more. Backcourts were becoming more and more athletic and skilled with the rise of players like Derrick Rose, Russell Westbrook, Kyrie Irving, and Stephen Curry. This shift made it harder for the older point guard crop to compete, with Chris Paul being the only survivor who still managed to play at a stellar level deep into the 2010s. On the other hand, Deron Williams could no longer keep up because he was neither the fastest nor the most skilled point guard in the NBA. He basically got caught in the in-between during that transition period. In the end, the decline of Deron Williams was a combination of different factors that ultimately weighed down on him until he lost the spark that made him a special talent early in his career. He could have been one of the greatest point guards in history had he been healthy and in the right environment his entire career. So what do you think? How great do you think Deron Williams could have become? What do you think caused his rapid decline? If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.